I'm Ann Hartstein, Secretary of the Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs. Elder Affairs' mission is to promote the dignity and independence of people 60 and over through our programs and services, among them Protective Services, which responds to the reports of abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation of people over the age of 60. As the senior population increases, regrettably, so do reported cases of elder abuse. This training film you are about to see was developed to assist Elder Protective Services, domestic violence, and rape crisis agencies in working together to better serve older women survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. The film is divided into 3 segments to be used together or separately. In the first segment, written and narrated by Dr. Holly Klosnick, an actual elder abuse report was modified to serve as the case of an older woman who is an alleged victim of domestic violence, and it illustrates interviewing techniques in such cases. The second segment, written and narrated by Dr. David Adams, demonstrates techniques for interviewing the alleged perpetrator of domestic violence situations, highlighted in segment 1. Although the 2 interviews relate to the same case, we use different actors to portray the interviewing caseworker and her supervisor in the second segment. In actual case interviews, the same caseworker would speak to both alleged victim and perpetrator. The last segment features an interdisciplinary panel discussion of the service options for older survivors of domestic violence. Among the panelists is a member from an older woman survivor support group, as well as staff from various agencies. One final note. In this training film, Adult Protective Services investigative interviews comply with Massachusetts law and regulations. While the clinical issues and techniques portrayed will be universally applicable, interviewers in other jurisdictions will need to follow their own specific laws, procedures, and standards of practice when conducting such investigations.
Hello, I'm Dr. Holly Ramsey Klosnick, and I'm a researcher, clinician, and trainer in the elder abuse field. This portion of this training will address planning and conducting Protective Services investigative interviews with older alleged domestic violence victims. Investigative caseworkers and supervisors must attend to forensic principles, including asking open-ended questions, clinical issues such as building rapport and actively listening, and ethical guidelines such as the duty to respect the alleged victim's right to self-determination. Practical issues must be addressed. For example, when and where to best interview, and determining if the alleged victim has disabilities such as hearing, mobility, or cognitive loss. Of key importance, investigations must be conducted in a way that best preserves the safety of the alleged victim and the caseworker. It is also essential to follow regulatory requirements such as state laws and agency policies and procedures. A short training segment cannot address in depth all of these important interviewing issues, nor can it depict one or more complete interviews because they often require about an hour or more. However, we will address key concerns and demonstrate investigative interviewing principles and techniques, including balancing building and maintaining rapport with investigative data gathering. An actual Elder Protective Services report provides the basis for our depiction of portions of an initial and a follow-up simulated interview. To protect the victim's confidentiality, all identifying information has been changed. Case facts have been fictionalized but convey common late-life domestic violence dynamics. An experienced Protective Services supervisor, Diane Powell of Elder Services of the Merrimack Valley, will play the role of the caseworker investigating this abuse report. An actress will play the role of the alleged victim. I'm here now with Diane. Diane, thanks so much for helping us out today.
Of course.
Would you please tell us about the Protective Services report that we're going to work with?
Certainly. We received a report containing the following information. The reporter, Ben, called Protective Services concerned about his mother-in-law, Mrs. Gloria Stevens, age 69. Ben is married to Gloria's daughter, Sandra. The alleged perpetrator is Gloria's 70-year-old husband, Ralph. Ben described Ralph as verbally and physically abusive to Gloria and also reported that Ralph has a long history of abusing his children, who are now grown. The most recent known incident of abuse occurred towards Gloria 2 weeks ago while Ben was visiting Gloria and Ralph. He heard them having an altercation in the bedroom. When Gloria came out of the bedroom, she had a black eye and appeared distraught. Ben reported that in the past he has witnessed Ralph verbally demean Gloria. Ben's wife Sandra, daughter of Gloria and Ralph, has described to Ben many incidences of Ralph physically injuring Gloria by throwing bottles at her and hitting her with objects including a tennis racket, a fireplace poker, and a fork. Ben stated that Gloria no longer discusses abusive incidences with Sandra because Ralph monitors the telephone when Gloria makes or receives calls. Ben describes Gloria as very guarded and resistant to speaking about abuse. He believes that she fears retaliation if she discusses Ralph. He also thinks she is in denial. He described Gloria as physically capable, although she has osteoporosis, back problems, and acid reflux disease. She walks without assistance, is able to speak and meet self-care needs, and has no problem with remembering information or other cognitive functions. She does not drive. Ben said that Ralph is retired and clinically depressed. He is involved with the court system after an incident between himself and his other daughter, Wanda. Wanda had moved in with Gloria and Ralph temporarily. Ralph forcibly took Wanda's 10-month-old baby out of her arms and aggressively put him into his crib, screaming at Wanda, "Quit spoiling that kid." Wanda filed assault and battery charges against her father, and Child Protective Services is believed to be involved.
Thanks, Diane. Protective Services supervisors guide caseworkers in planning and conducting effective interviews that preserve safety. In the next segment, I will play the role of supervisor and discuss with Diane her plan for this interview. Of course, supervisors must adapt their guidance to the caseworker's level of expertise. Diane will play the role of an experienced and skillful worker, and the supervision style depicted will reflect that. Diane, tell me about your new Elder DV investigation. What have you learned so far?
Well, this report was screened in, requiring a rapid response, and that, of course, affects our time requirements for contacting Mrs. Stevens. We received the report yesterday, so after I reviewed the report, I checked out our agency records. Mrs. Stevens has not been a client here previously, so we have no background information on her. Then I called the reporter to start the investigation.
Did you obtain any additional info from the reporter? And if so, how does that affect your plan to contact Mrs. Stevens?
Well, calling her at home to introduce myself and ask to meet with her is not a good idea because the report states that the alleged perpetrator monitors her phone calls. On the phone, Ben, the reporter, said that since Mr. Stevens retired, there is really no time that the family members can have a private phone call with her. Conversations with Gloria are difficult. They know that when they speak with her on the phone, they must avoid topics that might get Mr. Stevens angry. I thought about an unannounced home visit, hoping to find Gloria there alone and maybe speak to her privately. I also considered asking another worker to accompany me and interact with Ralph if he is home, but I think that those plans are risky.
I see your point. Given the report that Ralph has injured Gloria over the years by throwing things at her and hitting her, an unannounced home visit could be dangerous. Let's not chance it that he is or isn't there and does or does not become suspicious and then enraged at her after you leave. Another concern is Gloria's reported diagnosis of osteoporosis. She's very likely vulnerable to fractures.
I absolutely agree. I think the best approach is to ask Ben to help me access Gloria so we can speak with her privately and we won't endanger her. I don't want to alert Ralph that we're investigating alleged abuse until Gloria indicates that it won't be dangerous if Ralph learns about our involvement. Ben told me that Gloria babysits their 3 children in their apartment every Tuesday afternoon from about noon until 4, while both he and Sandra work. Ben drives Gloria to and from their apartment. I think the best approach is to ask if he'll let Gloria know that he's contacted us because he is concerned. If he will, perhaps he will also let her know that I'd really like to speak with her and let us meet privately in their home after she babysits on Tuesday.
Sounds like you've given careful thought to the access and safety issues. Have you come up with a list of areas to explore with Mrs. Stevens?
Well, I'll do the standard things. I'll introduce myself and my role and Protective Services, explain that we have a report of concern and that I'd like to do an investigation to assess her safety and her wishes. I'll let her know about confidentiality and the limits to this, I'll try to build rapport, then explore her personal and marital history, safety in the home and in their marriage, worries or problems about her husband's behavior, wishes about possible interventions. I'll see if she'll allow me to contact collaterals and schedule another visit with her. Of course, I'll note her appearance, looking for signs of abuse and neglect. The report says she had a black eye about 2 weeks ago, so there may or may not be any signs of that. I'll see if she's willing to talk about any recent difficulties with her husband or any injuries.
With the reporter's help, Diane has scheduled a visit with Mrs. Stevens for Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. in the home of Sandra and Ben. Ben has agreed to introduce Mrs. Stevens to Diane, then to leave them alone for a private conversation. In the next segment, we will see a portion of that initial interview. Diane has arrived and Ben has let her in and brought her into the living room where Mrs. Stevens is waiting. Ben explained that Sandra and the children are in the backyard and he is going to join them. Due to time constraints, this segment will depict only the interview portions that focus on explaining the caseworker's role, building rapport, accommodating aging and disability issues, and beginning to explore the alleged victim's safety and risks and willingness to be involved with protective services.
Hello, Mrs. Stevens. I'm Diane Powell. It's a pleasure to meet with you. I understand this is your daughter Sandra's home?
Yes, my daughter Sandra.
Mrs. Stevens, I really want to thank you for meeting with me today.
Do you want to sit down?
Thank you, yes. Where would you like me to sit?
Well, since you ask, sit there and I'll take this chair. I don't hear much with one ear, so that will be easier for me. Oh, my back isn't what it used to be.
Thanks for letting me know about your hearing loss. As we go along, just let me know if you want me to speak loudly or more softly, or if I'm not being clear.
Okay.
I work for Elder Services of the Merrimack Valley. We provide a variety of services. I work for the Protective Service Program. Our program works with people who may be living in situations that are unsafe for some reason. Some of our clients are dealing with family violence or problems with others, threatening them or taking advantage of them.
Well, I'm not sure what this has to do with me. I know my son-in-law said you wanted to talk with me, but I'm confused. I didn't ask for anyone to get into my private business.
We receive reports from community members who are concerned about the safety of older adults. I wanted to meet you, to get to know you, and let you know about our services. I would like to talk with you, if you are willing, about how things are for you at home. I want to let you know that our conversations are confidential, although we must report to authorities serious abuse that has happened or danger that exists. For the most part, we are able to protect the confidentiality of our clients.
What do you mean you talk to authorities?
While doing a protective service assessment, if we learn that serious abuse or neglect or exploitation has taken place, the state requires us to notify the district attorney's office. Oh, look at these cute kids. Are these your grandchildren?
Yes, Sandra, Ben have 3 children. That's Riley, she's 8, and Dylan, he's 5. And Maddie, the baby, she's 3.
Do you take care of them often?
Every Tuesday afternoon when both Sandra and Ben work. What did you say your name is?
My name is Diane.
Oh. The kids are a handful, but I love them so. Tuesday afternoons are my happiest times.
That's wonderful. Children certainly are a joy, although I know what you mean about them being a handful. What else do you enjoy besides Tuesdays with the grandkids?
Well, I have another grandchild, my daughter Wanda's baby, Sam. They were staying with us and I enjoyed that. But they had to leave. Now I don't get to see Sammy.
I'm sorry to hear that. That must be very hard for you.
It makes me sad. I miss Sammy, and I miss Wanda.
What happened that they needed to leave?
It's a long story. I guess you could say that my husband always has to have things his way. just has no patience or tolerance. He created a big scene and Wanda stormed out with the baby. I can't really say I blame her. Sometimes I feel like storming out too.
Mrs. Stevens.
Call me Gloria, Diane.
Thank you, Gloria. Can you tell me about a time when you felt like storming out?
Well, lots of times actually. But where would I go? It's really too late now to change my life, and too hard.
If you could change your life, Gloria, how would it be different?
Peace. There would be peace. No tempers, no outbursts, no throwing things, no rages.
Can you tell me about the throwing things and the rages?
I'm not sure I should be discussing all this. Oh, look at the time. I need to get Ben to take me home. There'll be hell to pay if I'm late.
I don't want to keep you and cause you problems, Gloria. I would love to talk with you another time. Is there a place where we could not be rushed and can talk more about the things at home?
Well, I'll think about that, and I'll talk it over with Sandra and Ben. They're both real good kids.
Gloria, would it be all right with you if I also spoke with Sandra and Ben about your conditions at home? When we receive reports concerning seniors who may be interested in hearing about community resources, we try to do an assessment to figure out what to recommend. Our program calls that an investigation. With your permission, I would assess how things are going for you, and we could discuss options you might want to consider to deal with a lack of peace at home. When we do assessments for our clients, it's helpful to speak with others that they trust.
Well, I guess that's okay. You can talk with Sandra and Ben.
Is there anyone else that you trust who knows about your situation that you would give me permission to speak with?
No, I don't think so. But I could ask Ben to pick me up again later this week and bring me here to meet you. I'll tell my husband they need me to babysit again.
When interviewing people who can provide information verbally, carefully selected open-ended questions invite them to share worries and problems. Diane skillfully used open-ended questions to encourage Gloria to discuss her home situation, including what happened that Wanda and Sammy needed to leave. Can you tell me about a time when you felt like storming out? And if you could change your life, how would it be different? When interviewing people with communication barriers, the caseworker may be limited to using only specific or yes/no questions. Communication barriers, such as stroke-related speech or cognitive loss, necessitate special planning, supervision, and adaptive methods. In the next segment, Diane and I will role-play a portion of a supervision session following the interview to discuss key findings.
Gloria's a lovely lady. Initially, she was guarded, which is understandable. As we talked a bit, she related hints about difficulties at home.
Verbal and physical abuse were reported. What did you learn relative to those allegations?
Here are some of Gloria's statements that are consistent with those allegations. My husband always has to have things his way. Ralph just has no patience or tolerance. Sometimes I feel like storming out. It's really too late now to change my life and too hard. One of her statements was particularly revealing. I asked her how she'd change her life if she could. She said there would be peace, no tempers, no outbursts, no throwing things, and no having rages.
That's consistent with physical and emotional abuse.
I tried to further explore, but Gloria became alarmed and said she needed to get home or there'd be hell to pay if she was late.
So, you're getting the picture of a woman who needs to placate her husband and worries about his temper outbursts and rages.
Definitely. I'd like to further explore all of this and the extent of danger in the home. When Gloria became alarmed and said she needed to go home, I felt like it was important to support her in doing that and not to press her.
That was very wise.
Yes, I think it gave Gloria the feeling that she could work with me and that I'd respect her limits and her wishes. Then she gave me permission to speak with her daughter and also her son-in-law, and she said she'd meet with me again.
Diane, when you talk with Gloria again and continue to assess her safety, Please try to screen for all types of abuse in addition to the reported emotional and physical. As we know, DV perpetrators often exert abusive power and control over many aspects of their victim's life. If one type of abuse exists, there are often multiple types. This polyvictimization in later life is all too common. So, please keep your questions broad enough to also screen for financial exploitation and sexual abuse.
I absolutely will. Most of the late life DV cases that I've handled have involved multiple types of abuses. I'll do my best to fully understand Gloria's situation and offer appropriate suggestions and referrals.
Did you notice that the caseworker skillfully used some of Gloria's key words in asking questions? For example, when requesting another meeting, she said, "We could discuss options you might want to consider to deal with the lack of peace at home." This followed up on Gloria's expressed wish for peace at home. Using the victim's words for abuse or difficulty conveys empathy and understanding. In the full supervisory meeting, the supervisor would ascertain that Diane contacts Sandra and Ben before conducting the follow-up interview with Gloria. The findings from those collateral contacts would be used to help plan the second interview. In the next segment, we will see a portion of the follow-up interview that's in progress.
When we spoke a few days ago, Gloria, you mentioned that there were times when you feel like storming out. Can you tell me about one of those times?
Well, yeah, a couple of weeks ago when he threw my hairbrush at me.
What happened?
It was right after Ralph had been a big jerk with Wanda and the baby. Sammy had been teething for days and was crying a lot. Wanda and I were doing our best to comfort him. Ralph has no patience with children. That's why I babysit Sandra's kids here. I don't want Ralph blowing up at them and me when they run around and make noise. Anyway, Wanda was holding Sammy and walking with him, trying to get him to stop crying, and Ralph started screaming, "Put that kid down and quit spoiling him." When Wanda didn't do that, he grabbed Sammy out of her arms, stormed into Wanda's bedroom, and just tossed Sammy in his crib and left him there alone, slammed the door shut. It was terrible. Wanda ran in to get the baby, and Ralph tried to grab him away. Wanda ran out of the house with Sammy. I don't blame her. I've been so worried about them. I haven't seen them since. I don't know if they were hurt.
Oh, Gloria, I can only imagine how hard that was for you, for Wanda, and for the baby.
It was terrible, just terrible. It's one thing when he hurts me, but when he hurts a baby, our grandchild, I can't forgive that.
Somehow all this led to him throwing your hairbrush at you?
Well, later that morning the police showed up and he went to the station with them. He came home in an awful mood. I was trying to keep away from him. Ben came over to see about a leak under the sink that he had promised to fix. It was bad timing, but then I thought maybe it was good that someone else was here. Ralph usually controls himself around outsiders.
What happened that he didn't control himself this time?
Well, like I said, I was trying to keep away from him. I was in the bedroom sorting out the clothes, and he came in and he grabbed me. I didn't like the way he grabbed me. I pushed him away. He hit the roof. He started yelling, "You're my blanking blank wife." He picked up the first thing he could get, my hairbrush off my dresser, and he threw it at me.
Oh, Gloria.
Hit me in the face. He left a mark under my eye.
I'm so sorry to hear about what you've been through, Gloria. How is your eye feeling now?
Well, it's been sore. The bruise is almost gone. I put makeup on when I go out so it doesn't show much.
Were you injured in any other way that day?
Well, it was sore where he grabbed me. And, all this talk is making me sad.
Gloria, I can understand your sadness. In our program, we have worked with many women of your age who have lived with family members that have tempers and that have hurt them.
Really? Women my age with husbands that hurt them? When you see television shows about women being hurt by husbands, it's always young women.
I have spoken to lots of women who have been married for many years to men who have hurt them. Many women like you have found ways to keep themselves safer in that situation. You mentioned that you don't babysit your grandchildren in your home and you try to keep away from Ralph when he's in a bad mood. Are there any other things that you do to increase your safety?
Mostly I try not to disagree with him and do what he wants.
Is it difficult for you to talk privately on the phone?
Oh no, that's not possible. Please don't call me at home. Just leave a message here with Ben or Sandra if you want to reach me.
I'll do that. Thanks for alerting me to that. Do you have a cell phone?
No, my husband doesn't want to pay the extra money.
Would you be interested in having a cell phone at no cost that you could use in an emergency?
I think he would just take it away from me, like how he grabs the phone away from me now when he doesn't want me to use it.
Ah, so it would be hard for you to call 911 in an emergency.
Yes.
You mentioned the other day that you sometimes feel like leaving. There are services that can help people in your situation. Would you be interested in talking with an advocate who can help you think about different options or ways for leaving or keeping yourself as safe as possible?
Well, I don't know about that. Leaving is huge. Sure, I'd think about it, but it's not really possible. I've been married to Ralph for over 40 years. I have no money, nowhere to go. I don't own anything or have any income. I wouldn't be able to get by without him.
Gloria, how do you know that?
How do I know that? Well, that's what he always tells me.
Do you and Ralph own the house that you live in?
It's in Ralph's name. He paid the mortgage all these years. I mean, I worked part-time in the school cafeteria for years, but I didn't even earn enough money to make it worth collect Social Security on my own. A check comes each month in my name, but as Ralph always says, it's really his because it's based on what he earned all those years.
Time does not permit us to depict an entire second interview that may last 60 to 90 minutes. In a full interview, the caseworker would offer the victim opportunity for medical evaluation of her eye and other possible injuries, ask about previous history of domestic violence, and request permission to interview other collaterals for this investigation. She would attempt a safety plan with Gloria. For tips on safety planning with older DV victims, visit the website of the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life that you see here on the screen. In our final segment, Diane and I will role-play a brief portion of the supervisory meeting in which the follow-up interview findings are discussed.
Gloria seemed more comfortable talking with me at this interview. However, it still seemed very hard for her to discuss things at home. I struggled during the interview with how much to continue exploring abuse and how much to offer support and respect her limits.
Yes, that's always difficult when interviewing victims, especially when they've been through long-term abuse. The fact that you are aware of that struggle and work to balance eliciting information and supporting suggests that you were skillful and careful.
Well, when Gloria said that talking was making her sad, I thought it might be a sign to stop trying, to open things up, and to offer some support and some information.
Good call. When was it that she said she was sad?
I had just asked her about if she was injured anywhere besides her eye. She said she was sore where Ralph grabbed her. Then she got very sad.
What do you make of that, Diane?
I'm wondering about sexual abuse, the constellation of factors. He was in an awful mood. He grabbed her. They were in the bedroom. She didn't like it, and she pushed him away, and that enraged him. Also, the grabbing her left her sore. She didn't want to further discuss it, so I followed her lead. However, I am thinking back to her saying that he blew up and screamed that she was his blanking wife when she pushed him away. That all hints at sexual abuse. And that's when he threw the hairbrush at her, like she didn't have the right to push him away.
Diane, I agree, but we don't have enough to substantiate sexual abuse yet. That warrants continued exploration. We know that sexual assault is often a part of domestic violence. It sounds like Ralph also financially abuses. He has all the marital assets in his name and tells her that her Social Security check belongs to him. Clearly, we have evidence for substantiating physical and emotional abuse and for referring this case to the district attorney. I know that you informed Gloria of that possibility in your first interview. You'll need to further discuss that referral with her and how making that report may affect her safety and needed next steps. We will now close this portion of our training on interviewing alleged older victims of domestic violence. As we've seen, it's important for investigators to screen for polyvictimization, including sexual assault, when there is evidence of domestic violence. For information on polyvictimization in later life, please see the National Committee for the Prevention of Elder Abuse website. For information on sexual abuse of older adults, access the Sexual Violence in Later Life information packet available on the National Sexual Violence Resource Center website.
This concludes Program 1, Interviewing Alleged Victims. Program 2 in the series continues the topic with Interviewing Alleged Perpetrators.